The world of the NFL is blinding, full of celebrity and opulence, but behind the curtain, some of its wealthiest players live lives of staggering simplicity. Christian Wilkins, a man who spent last spring working as a substitute teacher in several Oconee County schools. We're talking about men like Christian Wilkins, who banks his first-round draft money while choosing to fly on no-frills airlines, and Rob Gronkowski, who amassed a $70 million fortune from his contracts and refused to spend a single cent of it. Gronk's strategy was nothing short of genius. He never touched a penny of his actual salary. These are the gridiron giants who possess the power to buy the world but deliberately chose a life of humble means. Let's begin with Christian Wilkins, one of those truly astonishing NFL figures whose lifestyle is a complete mystery when compared to his net worth. Every document, every contract paints a picture of an incredibly wealthy athlete, a top draft selection who has secured millions upon millions in NFL deals. But if you were to witness how he navigates his daily existence, you would never imagine the fortune he commands. Long before the first $1 million check was ever cashed, Wilkins had made a solemn vow that no amount of money would ever corrupt the man he was. That disciplined mindset was forged in the fires of his youth growing up in Springfield, Massachusetts, the youngest of 8 children in a family that knew financial struggle intimately. Resources were always scarce, a harsh reality that instilled in him a profound respect for the value of every single dollar. Even after rising to stardom as a defensive tackle for Clemson, Wilkins rejected the seductive, glamorous life that so many college athletes chase. He wasn't driven to spend, he was obsessed with saving. While his peers were out on the town, Wilkins engineered a life of extreme frugality, maximizing his time at the team facility to get free meals and keep his own utility bills impossibly low. His commitment to saving soon became the stuff of legend. His teammates would tell stories of how Wilkins, rather than buying a soda, would craft his own lemonade at restaurants by mixing sugar packets in water and adding squeezed lemon wedges. His wardrobe consisted almost exclusively of free Clemson apparel. He shunned new clothes, and he chose to bike everywhere instead of owning a car. In his last year at Clemson, he took a job as a substitute teacher, earning a modest $80 a day, every cent of which he saved. By the time he was ready for the pros, Wilkins had already built a nest egg of around $15,000 purely through relentless discipline. When Wilkins was chosen in the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft and the millions began pouring in, absolutely nothing about him changed. Despite earning nearly $4 million a season in his early days, followed by a fifth-year option that paid over $10 million, Wilkins held fast to what he termed a low-maintenance life. You won't find him collecting exotic cars. He doesn't live in a sprawling mansion, and he has no interest in designer fashion. He's even been seen flying with budget carriers like Frontier, always prioritizing savings over luxury. Rob Gronkowski stands as one of the most shocking cases of a massively wealthy NFL player who lived as if he were completely broke because on the surface, Gronk was the last person you'd expect to be a penny pincher. He cultivated a reputation as a fun-loving, larger-than-life force of nature, a legendary tight end who hauled in touchdowns from Tom Brady and collected Super Bowl rings with both the New England Patriots and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Across his 11-year reign in the NFL, Gronkowski's contracts alone earned him a staggering $70 million. And yet, in the face of that immense fortune, he has consistently sworn that he has never spent $1 of his NFL earnings. Instead, Gronk made a calculated decision at the dawn of his career to live exclusively on his marketing and endorsement deals, funneling every single game check directly into his savings. This entire strategy was born from a need for financial self-preservation. As a second-round pick, Gronk understood that football careers are fragile and fleeting. Injuries, being cut, and early retirement are terrifyingly common, especially for a player in a position as brutal as tight end. From the very beginning, Gronk shared an apartment with a roommate he drove simple, unassuming cars, and he fiercely resisted the temptation to inflate his lifestyle just because his bank account was growing. The money for his first car and his housing came from a $50,000 bonus from his agent, not from his team's salary. Even as his star ascended and his contracts swelled to historic sizes, his spending habits remained grounded. Gronk has openly admitted he'll wear the same pair of jeans until they literally fall apart, valuing comfort far more than luxury. While his contemporaries were buying up lavish estates and fleets of supercars, Gronk remained laser-focused on minimizing his overhead. This wasn't about depriving himself. It was about securing absolute freedom, ensuring that if his career were to end in an instant, his future would already be secure for the rest of his life. Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins offers one of the most stark illustrations of an ultra-rich NFL player whose life bears no resemblance to his celebrity status. By any metric, Cousins is one of the most financially successful quarterbacks the league has ever seen. Throughout his career, his earnings have soared into the hundreds of millions, of fortune built on a fully guaranteed $84 million contract with the Minnesota Vikings and an unbelievable $180 million deal with the Atlanta Falcons. But for all of his incredible wealth, Cousins' daily existence has always mirrored that of a prudent, middle-class family man, not a sports icon. Kirk Cousins' legendary thriftiness has been a defining part of his identity since his earliest days in the NFL. Selected in the 4th round back in 2012, he operated under the chilling realization that the river of football money could dry up at any moment. While his peers were snapping up supercars, Cousins became infamous for driving a dented GMC Savannah passenger van, a vehicle he'd bought from his own grandmother for a meager $5,000. That van was more than just transportation. It was a rolling testament to his entire philosophy on wealth, practical, dependable, and utterly indifferent to projecting an image. But his living arrangements sparked even more disbelief. For several off-seasons, Cousins and his wife deliberately chose to reside in the basement of his parents' house in Michigan. In fact, they would sometimes even stay in the basement of his wife's parents' home down in Georgia. This wasn't because he was struggling to afford a mortgage. It was a calculated strike against wasting a single dime on unnecessary overhead. As he candidly admitted, living rent-free was simply the most logical choice while they meticulously planned their future. The financial code Cousins lives by is both simple and brutally effective. He refuses to pour money into anything that rapidly bleeds value, like luxury cars, yachts, or other ostentatious toys. His focus instead is on channeling his wealth into assets that grow and compound over time. It was only after building an ironclad financial fortress that Cousins and his wife finally purchased a lakefront property to construct their home. Then there's Jordy Nelson, one of those rare, incredibly wealthy NFL athletes whose lifestyle seemed completely immune to the fortune he amassed on the field. The numbers are staggering. Nelson raked in nearly $56 million over his 11-year NFL career, captured a Super Bowl championship with the Green Bay Packers, and cemented his legacy as one of his generation's most trusted wide receivers. Yet away from the roaring stadiums, his existence was far more aligned with that of a humble Kansas farmer than a millionaire sports icon. The truth is, Nelson's entire worldview was forged long before the NFL ever came calling. He was raised on his family's farm in Riley County, Kansas, an environment where grueling work was the norm and every dollar was treated with profound respect. That stark upbringing became an inseparable part of him even after he dominated as an All-American at Kansas State and was drafted in the 2nd round in 2008. Nelson never felt the slightest temptation to transform himself just because his bank account had exploded. While countless other players used their off-seasons to indulge in lavish vacations and lifestyle upgrades, Nelson's routine was a brutal return to his roots' 12-hour workdays on the family farm. He was out there driving combines, sowing and reaping crops, and helping oversee a cattle operation numbering in the thousands. Despite his multi-million-dollar contracts, he confessed that in his heart, he identified more as a farmer than a football player. Instead of mansions and flashy distractions, Nelson poured his earnings into farmland-heavy equipment and the tangible long-term assets connected to the life he genuinely cherished. His extreme frugality was a constant even during the intense grind of the season. Nelson once confessed to being unbelievably cheap, admitting that during road trips he would completely forego dinners just to save his per diem allowance. As his teammates headed out for expensive meals, Nelson would remain in his hotel room holding out for team snacks so he could pocket the cash. To him, saving money wasn't a chore. It was an instinct. Even when it came to maintaining his own property, he flat out refused to hire help just because he could afford it. His own father once quipped that despite being filthy rich, Jordy would buy up land cluttered with broken-down equipment and overrun with trees with the full intention of fixing it all himself the moment he got home. Outsourcing the labor wasn't in his DNA, doing the hard work was. Quin's story is another shocking example of an NFL superstar whose astronomical paycheck was completely disconnected from his lifestyle. On paper, Quin amassed tens of millions of dollars during a celebrated decade-long career with the Houston Texans and Detroit Lions, inking massive deals and becoming one of the league's most feared safeties. But if you were to witness how he actually lived during his playing days, you would never have suspected he was a multimillionaire. He was brought up in Summit, Mississippi, a world away from the culture of excess, and he carried that grounding perspective with him into the high-stakes world of the NFL. Upon entering the league in 2009, Quin made a pact with himself that would dictate his entire financial destiny. He vowed to never spend his money as if it were a bottomless well. Instead of letting his lifestyle expand with each new lucrative contract, he committed to an unwavering financial creed, the 30-70 plan. Quin and his family survived on a mere 30% of his after-tax income. The other staggering 70% was relentlessly saved and invested. That discipline was shockingly apparent. While his teammates were flaunting luxury cars, diamond-encrusted jewelry, and sprawling mansions, Quin continued to drive the same Yukon Denali he had purchased as a rookie. Even after he signed a monumental 5-year, $23.5 million contract with Detroit, he felt no compulsion to replace it. To outsiders, Quin's choices looked absurdly cheap. In his mind, it was the definition of being intelligent. For the first several years of his career, Quin's entire household ran on roughly $6,000 a month, a tiny fraction of his earnings. Every other dollar was funneled into long-term investments. Armed with a business education from college and the wisdom of a financial advisor, Quin strategically placed his capital into blue-chip public companies before diversifying into private ventures. He approached the world of investing with the same ferocious intensity he brought to the football field, meticulously researching every decision and always thinking a decade ahead instead of yielding to the allure of a quick buck. And the results of that discipline were nothing short of staggering. By the time he walked away from the game in his early 30s, the rumors were undeniable. His investments had exploded, poised to outgrow every single dollar he had ever earned on the field. Kerrigan stands as a living paradox in the NFL, a man whose fortune swelled into the tens of millions while his day-to-day life screamed of anything but wealth. On paper, his legacy was set in stone, a first-round draft pick, the absolute bedrock of the Washington franchise, and one of the most relentlessly consistent quarterback hunters of his generation. Across an 11-year reign of terror on the field, he amassed a colossal fortune, punctuated by a massive 5-year, $57.5 million extension in 2015. But to see Kerrigan in his prime was to see a ghost of his own wealth. Nothing about the way he lived would ever betray the fact that he was one of the highest-paid defenders in the entire league. The truth is, Kerrigan's entire worldview was forged long before the NFL millions ever came flooding in. He was raised in the heartland of Indiana, immersed in a grounded, no-nonsense world where the sweat on your brow meant infinitely more than the brand on your shirt. That iron-willed mentality propelled him to All-American status at Purdue, and it clung to him like a second skin the moment he stepped into the NFL. From the second his name was called in the 2011 draft, Kerrigan made a deliberate, unwavering choice to live far, far beneath his staggering income. While countless other athletes saw their first major paycheck as a green light for extravagance, Kerrigan slammed on the brakes. Even with that life-altering contract in hand, he opted to live in a simple apartment with a childhood friend, completely shunning the allure of a sprawling mansion. His choice of transportation was even more shocking. In a world of exotic sports cars, Kerrigan famously navigated the streets in a worn-out van he'd gotten from his own grandmother. As his career blossomed, he stubbornly stuck with the same modest vehicles he'd owned for years, refusing to indulge in luxury while his teammates roared into the facility in Bentleys and Lamborghinis. Kerrigan would just glide in unnoticed behind the wheel of something utterly practical and completely forgettable. His profound frugality even bled into his diet. He rejected the world of high-end restaurants and private chefs, choosing instead to prepare the vast majority of his meals right in his own kitchen. And when he decided to truly treat himself, his grand splurge was a trip to Chipotle. Darius Heyward-Bey. Darius Heyward-Bey represents another shocking case of an NFL star whose reality never came close to matching his immense wealth or his high-profile draft position. The resume paints a picture of football royalty, a top-tier prospect, the 7th overall pick in the 2009 NFL Draft by the Oakland Raiders, and an athlete who commanded tens of millions over his career. Yet off the field, his existence was a world away from the glitz and glamour expected of an NFL superstar. Long before the tidal wave of money crashed into his life, Heyward-Bey had learned a terrifying lesson about how fast it could all vanish, and he engineered his entire life to ensure history would never repeat itself. Heyward-Bey's entire financial philosophy was molded by the harsh realities of his youth. Growing up without a safety net, the constant threat of financial insecurity instilled in him a powerful early lesson in discipline. But the single greatest force shaping his financial destiny was his mother, Vivian, a certified accountant who understood the sacred value of every dollar. From the very moment he stepped into the league, she became the gatekeeper of his fortune. Instead of gaining unchecked access to his millions, Heyward-Bey subjected himself to a rigid, predetermined allowance. Every single transaction was meticulously documented, and he received constant financial updates, forcing him to confront exactly where his money was going at all times. At a time when young athletes were celebrating their first massive contracts with a storm of luxury cars, blinding jewelry, and sprawling mansions, Heyward-Bey chose a different path entirely. He deliberately kept his existence stripped down to the essentials, turning his back on flashy acquisitions and prioritizing a life of comfort over one of empty spectacle. One of the most stunning illustrations of his extreme thriftiness was his choice to cut his cable television service during the season, arguing he was never home to watch it anyway. For any other millionaire, it would be a rounding error, an expense so small it was invisible. To Heyward-Bey, it was a leak in the ship, a pointless waste. Despite banking an estimated $35 million throughout his career, he lived as if he were constantly on the brink of financial ruin. He once admitted, "I'm not really a flashy guy," revealing that he frequently had to deny his own desires even for things he could purchase 1,000 times over. Chad Johnson. Chad Johnson is perhaps the most legendary example of an insanely wealthy NFL player who consciously chose to live the life of a man who was flat broke. By every metric, Johnson was the definition of a superstar receiver. A 6-time Pro Bowler, one of the most dominant offensive weapons of the 2000s, and a man who accumulated nearly $49 million over an 11-year NFL career. With that kind of staggering wealth and celebrity, the world expected a life dripping in opulence, mansions, supercars, and endless luxury. But Ochocinco swerved in the completely opposite direction. From the moment his career began with the Cincinnati Bengals, Johnson waged war on the rampant consumer culture that consumes so many young athletes. He didn't bother with an apartment, let alone a house. For his first 2 years in the league, he literally took up residence inside the Bengals stadium. In his mind, the team facility was a palace. It offered everything a man could need: showers, a cafeteria, a place to sleep, televisions, and even video game consoles. The idea of paying rent to him was utterly illogical. And even when he finally moved out, he chose to live with relatives for years, rejecting the pressure to upgrade to a lavish home fit for a superstar. And his extreme thriftiness extended far beyond his living situation. While other athletes were dripping in custom watches and diamond-encrusted chains, Johnson openly confessed a shocking secret: every piece of jewelry he wore was a convincing fake. He'd pick up cubic zirconia from common mall shops like Claire's, operating under the belief that under the glare of stadium lights, nobody could possibly spot the deception. His approach to his wardrobe followed the exact same script. He stuck to affordable clothing lines, chose knockoff sneakers over authentic designer brands, and felt absolutely no compulsion to project the image of a millionaire. The way he traveled and ate also revealed a mind hardwired for scarcity. Despite possessing more than enough wealth to charter private jets, Johnson was a frequent flyer on budget carriers like Spirit, provided he could secure a seat in an exit row. When it came to dining, his preference was overwhelmingly for fast food, with a special place in his heart for McDonald's, a taste he never outgrew from his childhood. For him, a higher price tag never equated to greater happiness. By living so far beneath his income, he proudly states that he managed to bank over 80% of everything he ever earned in his career. Take Marshawn Lynch, for instance. Here is an NFL legend whose lavish bank account seems to exist in a completely different universe from his actual lifestyle. By all accounts, Lynch is an incredibly wealthy retired NFL running back, a Super Bowl victor, a multiple-time Pro Bowler, and one of the most unforgettable figures of his generation. Across a 12-year tenure in the NFL, Lynch pulled in close to $50 million from contracts alone, and that figure doesn't even touch his endorsement earnings. And yet, despite that mountain of cash, people in his inner circle have consistently said the same thing. Marshawn Lynch lives his life as if he's completely broke. Coming up in Oakland, California, he witnessed firsthand the brutal speed at which money could vanish and how frequently gifted athletes ended up destitute once their playing days were over. The moment he made it to the NFL, he made a silent but profound commitment. He would not spend a single dollar of his football earnings. Rather than living on his game day paychecks, Lynch made the incredible choice to save virtually all the money from his NFL contracts, surviving entirely on what he made from endorsements. This strategy on its own places him in a league of his own. While countless other players view endorsement money as a bonus, Lynch inverted the entire financial model. His partnerships with brands like Skittles, Nike, Pepsi, and Microsoft were what paid for his daily life, while his colossal NFL salary was funneled directly into savings and investments. By the time his career concluded, sources claimed he had successfully saved more than $40 million from his football salary alone. Even with all his wealth, Lynch's daily routines were notoriously frugal. His own friends and relatives have told stories about how he instinctively seeks out the cheapest option when they eat out, flatly rejecting expensive dishes in favor of the most budget-friendly item on the menu. His cousin, the rapper Mr. Fab, once publicly shared that Lynch is the kind of guy who will agonize over tiny sums, even getting stuck debating whether an item is worth $10 or $15. Lynch also steered clear of extravagant spending on vehicles or flashy belongings. Through the years, he's been known to drive unassuming cars, including much older models and even a Toyota Prius. He once even quipped about using his Prius to drive for Uber just to fight off boredom. Instead of burning through his money, Lynch put it to work. After leaving the game, he became a part owner of the Seattle Kraken. He poured money into various sports franchises, started his own companies, and began constructing a legacy of wealth that would endure long after his football career faded. He frequently offers unvarnished wisdom to the next generation of players, urging them to take care of y'all's chicken and to quit trying to win over people who will be nowhere in sight once the fortune dries up. Next up, Ryan Broyles. Ryan Broyles is another of those astonishing NFL players whose net worth could make your head spin, yet whose actual lifestyle remains incredibly down to earth. On paper, Broyles is an immensely wealthy professional football player, a wide receiver who shattered records at the University of Oklahoma before being drafted in the second round by the Detroit Lions in 2012. Throughout his career, Broyles amassed over $3.6 million in NFL contracts with a guarantee of more than $1.4 million. But if you were to witness how he conducts his daily life, you would never in a million years know it. Long before the massive paychecks started rolling in, Broyles had already made a pivotal choice. The money he earned in the NFL was destined to build his future, not to blow up his present. Having grown up in Norman, Oklahoma, he understood the immense power of smart financial preparation. Then, as a rookie, he had a meeting with a financial advisor who shared a piece of wisdom that would alter the course of his life. The advice was stunningly simple. Calculate your monthly expenses, lock in a budget, and invest every single penny left over. Broyles embraced that philosophy completely. He and his wife, Mary Beth, committed to an ironclad annual budget of about $60,000, a figure that had to cover all of their costs from their mortgage to their food. Every other dollar from his NFL pay to his endorsement checks was immediately diverted into investments, retirement funds, and real estate, guaranteeing them a stable financial future well after football was over. Even as the millions poured in, the day-to-day reality of the Broyles life was almost shockingly simple. He continued to drive the 2005 Chevrolet Trailblazer he had in college along with a Mazda 3 while his wife drove a Cadillac SRX. When it was time to move, he rented a U-Haul and did all the heavy lifting himself, saving thousands of dollars on professional movers. Their entertainment was just as lean. The pair decided against a cable subscription, choosing instead to use Apple TV and Netflix, while nights out for dinner were infrequent and meticulously planned. Even their vacations were approached with a deeply frugal perspective, as they utilized coupons and deal sites like Groupon to squeeze every bit of value out of their spending. Even his home in Dallas, Texas was a testament to this conviction. Built for purpose, not for show, and a world away from the flashiness you'd expect. He dove headfirst into the financial arena, obsessively tracking investments, absorbing wisdom from minds sharper and wealthier than his own, and leveraging every possible tool like the NFL's 401k match program. That relentless discipline became his salvation when the brutal reality of the sport struck and a career-ending injury tore him from the game. While others would have crumbled, Broyles executed a flawless pivot into real estate development, fueled by the very investments he had so wisely made. Now, Broyles' fortune continues to multiply, freeing him to pour his soul into his family, his business, and his community without the crushing fear of financial ruin. A story like this changes your perspective. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. And before you go, make sure you like this video and subscribe to NFL Rivals, because you will not want to miss what's coming next.